Could Will Levis be the perfect fit for Shane Steichen with Indianapolis? We get into that today on Locked On Colts. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Zach Hicks, your favorite co-host here from Locked On Colts. Today, I am joined by Mark Schofield. And Mark, just to show how inadequately prepared I am, I don't know where you're writing right now, and I did not write it down. For you guys who have been following Mark for a super long time, I remember Inside the Pylon back in the day, one of the greatest sites ever created. And Inside the Pylon, no USA Today. But Mark, where can people find your work nowadays?
It used to be, I get it, Zach. First of all, it's awesome to be here. By the way, I love the musical intros you guys have. It's so awesome. I mean, you guys didn't have that when I was over at Locked On Patriots. But So yeah, it used to be a lot harder of the day because I'd have to list off like 15 different places. But now look, I'm full-time at SB Nation. I mean, I actually have a full-time job, and this is scary. They're letting me do other stuff. I mean, yes, I'm doing a lot of NFL stuff and NFL draft stuff and quarterback stuff and film breakdowns and all that fun stuff. But they're letting me write about basketball, hockey. They're letting me build like an F1 hub, which is going to go up soon because I'm a big F1 guy. And so this could be fantastic. It could fail spectacularly. I could just have everybody fooled over there. But it's SB Nation. It's at Mark Schofield on Twitter. I'm very excited to be here. I'm very excited to talk about Will Levis because, betting odds are what they are. But I've seen some very interesting betting odds in the past couple of days that perhaps the young man from the University of Kentucky is the next Indianapolis Colts quarterback.
Yeah, he could be. Look, I know we have not given him his proper due on this podcast. We've done a couple episodes where we devoted them just to Will Levis, but you guys know my preference at the pick. So obviously that shows in the amount of content and which quarterbacks we talk about on here. So yes, if you guys are a little bit tired of Anthony Richardson this, Anthony Richardson that, it's time to talk a little Will Levis today. So Mark, just to jump off here and get into this, what are your overall thoughts on Will Levis as a prospect? Do you think he kind of gets some, I don't want to say unnecessary hate because I understand where the concerns come from, but do you think he's a better prospect than what some people will throw out there where they throw out like the Mitch Trubisky and Zach Wilson type comps for him?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally a couple of things here. One, I kind of like all four, to varying degrees. Like, is Will Levis my QB1? No, he's my QB4. But do I think he's a first round draft pick? Yeah. Would I be shocked if he fell out of the say top 10? Or say top 11, because we'll throw Tennessee in there at 11. Yeah, I'd be very surprised by that. And I think as we're going to get into, there are some things that he does very well on tape, particularly if you look at 2021. And I had a very interesting discussion with Aaron Freeman at Locked On Falcons like a week ago. And we talked about how Levis might be that rare prospect where you can make a legitimate case that his situation will really improve coming to the NFL, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like – CJ Stroud's throwing to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Garrett Wilson and guys that are going to go in the first round, guys that are going to go in the first round in this draft, or Bryce Young and all the talent he had around him. The drop-off in what he had around him from 21 to 22 was significant. He also had to change an offensive coordinator into an offensive coordinator and, say what you want about Rich Gangarello, but let's just say there are mixed reviews on his coaching prowess. He had to deal with a lower body, the foot, the toe injury. And so when we get to a week from Thursday night, because we're doing this the week before the draft, when we get to the moment that the team decides to turn in the card with his name on it, the conversation that's going to play out in that draft room. It's get him into our system, our coach, and our talent. And we're going to get the 21 guy, and we can build from there. And so I think that's one case to be made from him. And ultimately, look, some prospects, or you could almost say all prospects, aren't what we make them out to be. The guys that we think are great, maybe they're just good and we're building them up. But the guys that we think are bad, maybe they're good but we're just kind of dating them a little bit along the way. I mean, Stetson Bennett, we're saying he's going to be selling Audis by 2 years from now, but he might be a viable NFL backup at some point, or he might be a slot receiver because he tested well at the combine. And so I think it's a little bit, we try to make it black and white. I'm as guilty of it as anybody, but it's all really a different shades of gray. Now, I will say this about Levis. The arm talent is there. I was in Lucas Oil for his throwing session at the combine, and you could see the velocity. You could see the arm talent. It isn't, the best in the class, but NFL plus arm, I think. And there are things that he did in that offense, particularly in 21, but even bits and spurts in 22, where you're like, okay, that's plug and play NFL stuff. Like that's going to work at the next level. An NFL team can craft an offensive system, an offensive philosophy around him, and that's going to work. I think he's got a little bit more athleticism than perhaps we got to see last year because of the injury. I think he's a very sort of competitively tough kid. And you and I have talked for years, Zach, about how that matters. And so there are things watching him over the past 2 years that he does really well. And I do think that had he come out and say 21, he's probably QB1 or at least QB1B with Kenny Pickett. And so it's just a function of the Stroud, Young, they're maybe in a tier by themselves, although maybe Stroud's fallen. I don't know what to believe these days. The excitement over Richardson. And then it's like Will Levis, who's like, yeah, he was great last year, but, kind of struggled this year. And, maybe he's not the best guy of the group.
Yeah. Will Levis, he's a guy where, yes, he never really put it fully together. And I think he would even say that too, because there's a reason he came back for 2022. He thought that he could be a better prospect than what he was in 2021. He thought he could have a better season. And with the injury, with the change in offensive coordinator, with the lack of talent that they had this past season, he just did not have the year that he expected. It was kind of like that Jordan Love type situation.
Right.
Yeah, where Jordan Love goes back and it's just, oh man, like where was that year before Jordan Love and stuff like that? So it's kind of a similar situation. But yeah, I love what you said there. He is a very talented quarterback, good arm. I really love how he just changes mechanics, and he has so much hip torque and hip flexibility in those hips and how he rips through. Just such an explosive type of athlete. And you can see that in how he throws. You can see that in when he scrambles and how he's, jumping over guys and stuff like that too. But I was actually really impressed by how efficient he was in the quick game. I think there were some timing issues, obviously, because of the young weapons that they had there and because the change in offensive coordinator. But when he was in like empty personnel or something, or he had that quick read or like an RPO or something like that, he was really quick and decisive with the ball. And he has a lightning quick release. Like that ball is out of his hand. The second he decides where he's throwing it, that ball is out of his hand. Like it's already in that receiver's chest. So I think, people see this big arm quarterback and they see a guy who, they're saying like, oh, this could be the next vertical passing guy in the NFL, which we'll talk about in our next segment here. But like, I was really impressed by how efficient he was in the quick game. And I think last year, like over the middle, for instance, he was like a 70% passer throwing in the middle, between the numbers and stuff like that. So I do think there are a lot of things to work with there with Will Levis.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the I love that you brought up the quick game, because I think that's a function of when we say big arm quarterback, people automatically think, oh, well, he's going to be in a downfield passing offense. Right. No, I mean, you could still spread the ball around and carve defenses up underneath to set yourself up for then that deep shot over the top. And a lot of what he did both in 22 and even back in 21, his game against LSU in 21, there are a lot of really nice quick game concepts there. He had a mirrored curl flat for a red zone touchdown where he's moving defenders with his eyes and going full field. He had to throw in that game on double China 7 with the corner route from 3 and the 2 under routes. And he's reading it perfectly, time in, rhythm, placement, all that. But then this year, you mentioned throwing over the middle. His throws on dig routes really sort of impressed me. Like, so good. Let's not forget that's critically important in today's NFL, because we're living in this sort of too high, too deep world where you got 2 deep safeties, cover 2, cover 4, quarter half, all that stuff. Frontside concept, backside dig route, right? Like that's kind of where the NFL is played a lot of times. And if you can rip that dig route and throw it without fear, that's a big club to have in the bag. And a lot of quarterbacks, even quarterbacks in this class, even quarterbacks that might go ahead of them, aren't as consistent or as confident with, let's say, throwing that route as he is. So that certainly stands out as well. I mean, I know we're going to talk about scheme fit in a moment, and there are perhaps some ways this could work for him and ways that, it might not work for him in the NFL, or at least schemes might have to be altered a little bit. But you take an offense where you're building around some quick game stuff, front side concept, you had a mirror to curl flat spot, something like that. If you don't like it, come to the backside dig, and then set up some deep stuff downfield. That's pretty big. So I like that about him. And then the other point I want to build off of, again, brilliant part about the explosiveness as an athlete, right? We saw this more with Richardson, after his workout, people saying, 40-inch vertical, what does that do for a QB or that explosiveness as an athlete? Because it gets to that word you said, torque, right?
Yep.
What does torque lead to? Velocity. What does velocity lead to? An extra half second or so in the pocket to read out a concept and throw it, right? We've heard some Carson Wentz, Matthew Stafford. There were some Josh Allen comparisons in there as well. But to build off the Josh Allen comparison, I still remember a throw he had his rookie year in Lambeau Field against Green Bay. Right side hash mark, left side of the field. He's throwing an out route. So it's right hash mark, left sideline. And he stared at this route. He stared at it. And I'm like, you got to throw this. And he rips it because he has that torque, that explosiveness as an athlete. So it still gets there when it needs to get there. But he could take that extra half a second to sometimes a full second in the pocket to read something out. Levis is going to have that too because of that explosiveness as an athlete, that hip torque, like you mentioned. And that's huge for a young quarterback. The more time you get to figure something out between the ears, that's big. And so Levis will have that going for him as well.
Yeah. And that's one of my biggest pluses for Will Levis is this is a kid who did not win the starting job early in his career at Penn State, goes up to Canada, works with that biometrics, biokinetic, whatever it is. I can't remember what the exact word is of what it is. Something sciencey. He worked up there. Yep. And worked on his explosiveness in the hips, explosiveness on his throwing motion, and being able to pull his hips through. And yes, look, Will Levis, he's a phenomenal athlete. He's a little bit rigid. He's not super loose. He's not the best at getting his hips out to the sideline and on those out breaking routes, which we'll talk about in the next segment. We talk about scheme fit, but I think this is a guy where, again, that hip torque is so good and that explosiveness is so good that it makes the arm even better than what it is. Like, he has a good arm. And I think there are moments on film where I'm like, this is the best arm I've seen in college football because of that torque, because of how he rips through. And I know when he gets to working with a QB trainer here in the NFL or works with 3D QB or whoever he goes with, they're already going to have that foundation, that foundation. And that way, when you go to these, it's like, okay, we just have to fix the footwork because the hip is great. The hips are great.
I mean, from I'd say like the knees up, he's really good.
Really good.
It's like the footwork part of it that you're going to need some work on. But, there are few quarterbacks that come out that are like perfect textbook throw in, teach and tape kind of guys. Like Brad Kaya was one of those. And I don't know, where's Brad Kaya right now? I was high on him before that.
Why are we bringing Kaya into this, man? That's my biggest draft miss. I try to hide that. I hide any love I have.
I am wide open about my misses because I have lots of them. I mean, I could talk about my Josh Rosen QB1 takes as well. Like, we've got some misses. I mean, we all do. But what you learn from those, Kaya, Rosen, and others, is like, you don't have to be so like perfect with head to toe if you've got, for example, with Levis, that torque, because maybe the feet aren't quite right, but when you can take an extra second to read something out, make sure of it, and then rip it the way he can, you can kind of make up for that, or at least you can build off of that. And we've seen quarterbacks fix footwork. We've seen quarterbacks fix mechanics and things like that. And so, it doesn't worry me as it used to when I was such a stickler for like teaching tape mechanics.
Yep. I was the same way. I got into mechanics 2 years ago with the Carson Wentz stuff coming to Indy, and I got a little too rigid with it. And then you got to realize that, look, as long as the ball's getting where it needs to go, mechanics are just a part of that. They're not like Pat Mahomes mechanics.
Yeah. That's what I came up with the idea that mechanics don't matter until they matter, right? Like if the ball is getting there when it needs to be there on time in rhythm, I don't care if you throw it up between your legs, around your back, like as long as it's getting there. But if it's not, and it's because of something mechanically, then that's when it matters and you need to fix it. So, Levis has some things he needs to improve on, but they're not things that are going to be like a barrier to him having a good NFL or a great NFL career.
Right. Exactly. So now we're done just hyping up Levis and making it sound like he's our QB1. Yep. Getting up, guys. We're going to talk about his schematic fit in the NFL and if that fit is with the Indianapolis Colts. But first, grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's /1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss your chance to get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel.com today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the Major League Baseball. All right, Mark. So we're hyping up Will Levis, making it sound like he's perfect. We're like, you know what? Here we go. In Indy, QB1, face of the franchise. I don't love his fit with Shane Steichen.
Yeah. And we talked about this before. Like, and this is part of the reason why. And, we were at each other's Twitter mentions last week, and I saw some pushback on, you love Richardson, you don't like Will Levis. So I understand what
I know who you're talking about. That guy's in every single.
So I know what you've been going through the past couple of weeks and months. The thing is, you can like a quarterback as a prospect in a vacuum.
Yeah.
But then not like his specific fit with a particular team, coach, system, whatever. An example of that might be from perhaps another year. You mentioned, let's take, for example, Justin Fields, right?
Right.
Like, I really liked Justin Fields, liked him a lot coming out, but his fit in, say, a New England quick game type of offense that we saw them run with Tom Brady. As much as I liked Justin Fields as a prospect, and I'm using the Patriots because I'm a New England Patriots fan, it perhaps wasn't the greatest fit, which made it really tough for me to try to sit there on draft night and go on show after show saying, please, Bill Belichick, come up for Justin Fields, because maybe the fit wasn't quite 1-to-1. And so, when you talk about a prospect in a vacuum, you can like a lot of what they do, like we do with Levis, but not quite like his fit in this Indianapolis offense, where, provided it looks similar to what we've seen Steichen do with Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, it's more of a downfield vertical offense. Yep. You're going to use a quarterback in the run game, which Levis can do, but Hurts is a very good runner as a quarterback. And I think the fact that he's the highest paid player in the NFL history right now, a lot of it has to do with what he does from the pocket, but some of it has to do with what he does in the run game, what he means in the run game. But he's also a very good downfield passer. It was one of the things I liked about him coming out of college, coming out of Oklahoma. You saw it at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine, the touch and the deep ball. I've been trying to pair Bruce Arians with a quarterback for, almost a decade now. And I thought I was going to actually get it with Jalen Hurts, because I thought, look, he's a good downfield thrower. Bruce Arians, it could work. I still never got it. So I'm hoping Arians comes back to coaching so I can finally get that right. Now, with Levis, as we mentioned, his best fit might be more of a quick game kind of offense, more of a spread type of offense, more of a, yardage after the catch. The New England offense that I sort of talked about, that we've seen from them in the past, sort of under center play action, horizontal throws, where he can show some of the quick game powers he showed, we talked about earlier. That might be perhaps the way to get him to his potential ceiling, or close to his potential ceiling. The fitted Indy, provided it looks like the Eagles offense we saw last year, might not be the best 1-to-1. Now, look, Steichen can obviously tweak his offense to the quarterback. So the hope is, if the markets are right, if the tea leaves are correct, and Levis ends up in Indy, that Steichen looks at it and says, okay, we're going to cater our offense to him. I'm not going to make him run Jalen Hurts' offense.
Right.
I'm going to make my Eagles offense the Will Levis version thereof, and more quick game and things like that. But the fit, as we expect this offense to look like, provided it's the Philly offense, isn't quite as clean and easy as it might be for some other quarterbacks.
Yeah, and that's my thing. Look, Shane Steichen, I have full faith in this guy. I think he's going to be a phenomenal head coach, and I love what he's done with every quarterback he's worked with. So you could give him Stetson Bennett, and I would talk myself into it somehow.
Yeah,
somehow.
Absolutely.
Maybe not. Okay, maybe that's a bad example, but maybe. But with Shane Steichen has a philosophy, and that philosophy is, I'm the advanced version of Norv Turner. The Air Coryell, I want to attack down the field. And yes, I'll pepper the short game. And I think Will Levis can do that. He can come in from day one and he can pepper that short game like Shane Steichen wants. But I don't think he adds that dynamic ability as a runner, even though he's a physical runner. Again, he's an explosive physical runner. But he's just not, he's kind of rigid. I don't think he can make guys miss in space as well as some other guys in this class. So I think that limits him there. And then the vertical game, Levis is plenty capable of taking the occasional deep shot right now. But I don't think he's a guy where, if you're calling 4 verts against middle of the field closed, I don't think he's going to layer like a touch pass over the top and get it to the sideline and have your receiver toe tap it in, for a sideline catch. I don't think he has that ability right now. And he could fully grow into that. He could fully grow into it and get better with time, work on his footwork, work on setting that hallway out to the boundary and getting that ball out there. But as of right now, I think Will Levis projects well in Steichen short game.
Yep.
I just don't see him being that dynamic quarterback that Shane Steichen kind of needs, and again, I'm not trying to push my Anthony Richardson agenda right now. I'm just saying you either need someone who's going to be a high level, guy who can operate both in the short and intermediate and deep game, like a really high level anticipator who can do all that, or you need a guy who's going to be so dynamic that you already have that base floor. And I think Levis kind of falls short a little bit in both of those areas.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and I think that's why, as I've said earlier throughout this draft cycle, like if you want to tell me any of these guys is your QB1, like I can see it.
Right.
And you might have, Levis as your QB, say 3 ahead of Richardson at 4 on a sort of generic, non-team specific big board. But when it comes to Indy, because of what you just talked about, because of the fact that Richardson is that sort of dynamic player in the run game, has some of the stuff that you need downfield, maybe he's a cleaner fit than Levis in what we expect this offense to look like. Now, again, like you said, this is a very smart coach coming in who, while I understand you're exactly right, he's like Norv Turner of the future. That's how he sort of views himself. Yeah. He's also smart enough to like tailor what he's done. I mean, you look at the Eagles offense last year to the year prior, again, there were some changes that were made. He started to really sort of expand what he asked Jalen Hurts to do. So it wouldn't surprise me if Levis is indeed the pick. You see something similar, maybe in reverse, where it's, all right, we're really going to focus on quick game, some design shots off of play action, a lot of, post over, Yankee, whatever you want to call it, which they do a lot of. And again, you bring that dig route into play, and we'll start to fill in more of the vertical concepts, more of the stuff deep down to the boundary where set in the hallway, like you said, is so critical. When footwork starts to play more of a role, we'll start to fill those gaps in as you get better with your footwork, cleaner with your footwork, get more fluid in the ways that you need to. And so that would be the hope. And I think Steichen is smart enough, and frankly, he's the new wave of coaches that aren't stubborn, that aren't like, look, this is what we're doing. And so you're our quarterback, but it's my offense. This is how you do it. We're seeing this next generation of coaches much more open to the idea of, as we've been all saying for years, right? Draft a quarterback, draft a player, but tailor your system to what they do well. Don't make them try to be something they're not in your offense.
Yeah, the best example actually with Shane Steichen is, his predecessor, his person he looks up to, Norv Turner, goes to Carolina to fix Cam Newton, and Norv Turner kind of just tried to put Cam Newton in the Norv Turner offense, tried to make Cam Newton a Norv Turner quarterback. Then you have Shane Steichen coming to Philly, and he has Jalen Hurts, who is kind of a lot, I think he's a little more efficient than Cam ever was, but you get a guy like Jalen Hurts who does kind of the similar things as Cam Newton, and where Norv Turner failed with Cam Newton, Shane Steichen succeeded with Jalen Hurts. So this is that new age guy where, yes, he has his end goal, his end philosophy of, I want to score in 2 plays. I don't want to score in 10, 11, 12. I want to score in 2 plays, and I want to put up 50 every single game. But there's multiple ways to get there. And I do think Will Levis is a guy who can get there. I love that you mentioned earlier in the show the split field concepts. That's what the Eagles did so much of. They would put spacing on one side and that backside dig. They would put a slant flat on one side along with the dig on the other, something like that, just to keep peppering that middle of the field, peppering the defense, keeping them honest, getting AJ Brown by himself in those 3x1s. Obviously, it helps to have an AJ Brown. It
helps to have an AJ Brown, right?
It always helps to have an AJ Brown. But I do think there are some things that Steichen can do to make the game easier for a guy like Will Levis. But just for me, again, if we're talking pure offensive philosophy style, I think Will Levis best fits in a Patriots style offense, that Josh McDaniels type offense, or a Shanahan scheme. I think the Shanahan scheme, that's what he's been in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of why you're seeing like some of the teams that have been talked about with Levis, like Tennessee, for example, some other teams, even the idea of perhaps the Vikings trying to make a big move up to try to get Levis, because now it's probably an easy 1-to-1 fit for him, the experience in it, the fact that skill set that he has is probably the best. That's the best kind of offense and philosophy and environment for him. But that's not to say it can't work. And again, It's interesting. I'm going to bring up a good friend of mine, Dan Hatman, who was a scout with the Eagles. He was a scout with the Giants. He has a Super Bowl ring from when they beat the Patriots that he loves to put in my face every time we talk. But he's been in these rooms. He was part of the Eagles team that put together the dream team under Louis Riddick. And he always told me that, like, the biggest fights aren't like the overall grades, right? The biggest fights happen when it comes down to the scheme fit, because that's when you get the most disagreement. That's when you, like, people generally agree on a player's traits, like we have, right? And like other people have agreed on traits. NFL front offenses, generally when they study players, the fights aren't over, can this guy, does he have a good arm? The fight is, can that arm, whether it's good or bad or whatever, fit in our offense? And I think that's sort of the tension that's playing out with, the Colts fans and Levis versus Richardson, or in Carolina with Stroud versus Young. It's like, we know where these players are. We're all sort of in agreement generally about what they do and what they do well, but it's that next level debate of, okay, but does that work best for us? And so could Levis work in Indianapolis? Yeah, with some tinkers that we talked about. Other guys might be an easier fit.
Yeah, for sure. And again, at the end of the day, I like Will Levis. I like him a lot, actually. Like last year, he's my QB1. Even this year, honestly, he pushes up. I mean, he's QB4 for me as well. But like, it's not. But
it's not like years past where the gap from 1 to 4 is like 2 rounds. It's like the gap from 1 to 4 is like a half a round. Like I've got Stroud 1. Stroud is 1, Young is 2, Richardson and Levis at 4. But Stroud and Young are like my 2 top 5 guys, and Richardson and Levis are like my 15 to 25 guys. Like that's kind of where I have them, and that's in this draft class, that's a top 10 pick.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenal class for quarterbacks. Honestly, at the very top. I mean, how lucky are we to have 4 guys that we could all look at and be like, you know what? These are first round quarterbacks, and despite what the stats say, or despite, the outlier size with one of them up there and stuff like that as well.
They're first round guys.
Right. But at the end of the day, when it comes to Will Levis and it comes to his success, whether it's with Indy or not, is everything between the ears. That's the biggest thing. And Shane Steichen says it best, it's that drive to be great. That drive to be great is what he's looking for in quarterback prospects. So if he sees that in Will Levis, and he says, you know what, I can build a Patriot style scheme or a Shanahan scheme around him. Again, I'm so sold on Shane Steichen. I'll be sold on Will Levis being the pick at 4, or if they trade up to 3, I could sell myself on it.
Or Stetson Bennett at 4, like you said.
Like look,
that's going to be the tagline from this show. They should draft Stetson Bennett at 4 because Steichen can make it work.
There's a certain beat writer here in Indy who keeps egging me on in DMs. Telling me about Stetson Bennett and how he's a winner and all this great stuff. So
I mean, look, sure the Patriots have a number of picks in that 199 range, and I keep looking at that. I'm just like, dear God, if the Patriots end up picking Stetson Bennett around pick 199, my next 3 months are going to be brutal.
Oh, he'll start a game next year for y'all.
Yeah, he might start 17 of them.
All right, man. All right. So we talked Will Levis. We talked Stetson Bennett a little bit. We had to get some Stetson Bennett in there. I think that's all we have for today, guys. Again, at the end of the day, if the Colts take Will Levis, Mark and I at least are like, you know what? I think it can work. It might not be the greatest scheme fit, but I think it can work there. If you guys are not already following him on Twitter, at Mark Schofield, one of the best in the business. And again, you can find him at SB Nation now, but you can find a lot of his old work there on Inside the Pylon. It's still up there, I believe.
Still up there, kicking around. They haven't turned the servers off yet.
Yeah, let me just shout out the Inside the Pylon glossary. One of the greatest things. I love it so much. I still go to it today. I still quote it in articles today. Yeah. And that thing's, 10 years old?
One of the first F1 things I did was the F1 glossary, because I had so much fun being part of the ITP glossary over there, defining stuff that I wanted to do for F1. But it was great fun to put that together, and it warms my heart, Zach, to hear that people are still using it.
Oh yeah, it's the best. It's the best even for someone like me who's become such a football nerd, and I already know a lot of this stuff. I love to just refresh on that stuff. So if you guys want to learn more about the game of football itself, Inside the Pylons glossary for sure. Make sure you guys are following us too as well, at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also subscribe to Locked On Colts podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your ratings and reviews. Make sure you guys check out Jake's episode from yesterday, and we'll have some more fun stuff in store the rest of this week. And we'll see you guys tomorrow.